Hi everyone, and welcome to Critically Thinking Christian, where we talk about all kinds of subjects such as Christian culture, pop culture, and more. I'm your host, Alicia. Please note that my videos are primarily intended for a Christian audience. If you're not a Christian, that's fine. I'd love for you to stay and share your thoughts. But by and large, I am assuming that most of the people watching this are in fact Christians. Moreover, I want to make it clear that while I believe my opinions to be reasonable, and I try to base them on both biblical and historical truth, they are ultimately my opinions. If you find them helpful, great. If not, just forget about them. Let's go! Today's video is about the most classic translation of the Bible, the King James Version. Contrary to what some may think, this was not the first modern English translation of the Bible. That would be the Coverdale Bible, dating back to 1535. In fact, there were several English translations made before the KJV was printed in 1611. However, the King James Version was the first English translation authorized by the King of England at the time, and so is often referred to as the Authorized Version, and is noted for its incredible poetic beauty. However, while the KJV has merit as a translation, I've encountered more than one person who seems to think that it is the only English version that ought to be allowed. Some actually find more modern English translations not only unnecessary, but offensive. Switching from such beautiful, time-honored language to the plain language of our day just seems irreverent. However, there are several responses to this attitude. First off, it's the same objection that people made to even having an English translation in the first place. Many people in the 16th century were horrified at the idea of the time-honored Latin of the Vulgate turning into the common, vulgar English that ordinary people spoke. But at the end of the day, the answer is the same. The original manuscripts of the Bible were not written in some fancy ecclesiastical language, but in the common Greek of the day. It wasn't even beautifully written Greek, as the New Testament writers weren't Greek themselves and wouldn't have had a real feel for the language as a native speaker would have. It really shouldn't be that surprising that the Word of God was written in common speech when you consider the fact that the Word himself came in the form of a common poor man. Second, the KJV is indeed beautiful, but it is, to be blunt, severely outdated. People who have grown up with it or are used to reading Jacobean or Elizabethan English will probably not mind it, but for those who are new to the church and the Bible, the KJV might as well be written in another language entirely. Much of it will either mean nothing or something completely different than what was intended. There really is no such thing as a timeless translation because language itself is always changing. Moreover, as someone with a background in ESL, I will say quite frankly that the KJV is utterly useless in an ESL environment. I once taught Chinese students in a Christian school where the curriculum forced the students to learn the Bible verses in KJV. The curriculum was actually intended for American homeschool children. It was chosen for this program because of its convenience for students at varying English levels. Using KJV with these students was a nightmare because the students barely understood contemporary English, let alone Jacobean. All it did was make their heads hurt. We often would read their Bible verses again in NIV so they could understand what it was saying. I know there are people who have been taught to read using the KJV, but those people were native English speakers, not English language learners. KJV just isn't a viable option in these cases. Third, precisely because KJV is so poetic, it's a good idea to get away from it at times because the beauty of the language can actually lull us into not taking it seriously. We hear it and sigh at how lovely it sounds when we should really be feeling shame or horror or adoration for God. Nothing should take our attention away from God himself, not even his written word. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the KJV as a translation as such. I know plenty of people who study with it and pastors who preach from it. That's perfectly fine. I just want to make it clear that we shouldn't put any translation up on a pedestal. The KJV has its ups and downs like any translation. Use it or don't use it, but don't pressure or shame anyone because they use a different translation from you. As Paul put it in Romans 14:5, one person judges one day to be more important than another day. Someone else judges every day to be the same. Let each one be fully convinced in his own mind. That goes for translations as well. Well, that's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. And remember, my brothers and sisters, so whatever you eat or drink, or whatever you do, do everything for the glory of God. Thanks for watching. God bless.